Hey everybody, it's Eric from EPAutos.com, your libertarian car guy. Look at the stinking pig. There's your tax dollars at work, or I should say my tax dollars at work, sitting in his $45,000 to $55,000 Ford Explorer Police Interceptor. Just sitting there, bloated, fat cop, sitting by the side of the road, waiting for some poor victim to go by at faster than whatever the posted speed limit is. On this case, it's 55 miles an hour. It's been 55 miles an hour on this road since the 80s. That's how long I've been coming to where I currently live. And I say that to make the point that, okay, so 40 years have gone under the wheels, and we have not seen an increase of any appreciable degree in the speed limits on these secondary roads, as if all the improvements in stopping distances, braking, handling, all those things, and all the safety technology has had absolutely no payoff in terms of us being allowed to legally drive any faster. Of course, we drive faster regardless because everybody knows it's preposterous. Hang on a second, I gotta get around this guy. I'm going to speed. Oh, look, I'm speeding. It's so unsafe. Anyway, so they've held the limits down low on the secondary roads, and it's very much analogous to what would have been the case if the 55 mile an hour national maximum speed limit had not been repealed. Now, some of you who are younger, if you're say under 30, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about because you were in diapers when there was still such a thing as the national maximum speed limit. But for about 20 years, from 1974 to about 1994, the federal government decreed that you're not allowed to drive any faster than 55 miles an hour on the highway. Now, the context for that is interesting because prior to the imposition of the NMSL back in 1974, most American highways were posted at 70, 75 miles an hour. In some places like Montana, there were no formal speed limits. It was just a reasonable and prudent standard. Then the federal government came in and said, no, for safety, we don't want people to drive any faster than 55 miles an hour. And my God, it was torture. I grew up during that period. I was in college during that period. And if you could imagine, just try to imagine, do it sometime. Go out on a highway and set your cruise control at 55 miles an hour and see what that's like. Anyway, thank God it was repealed, largely to the efforts of the National Motors Association, which I've got a whole separate video about. But anyway, the point is that at least now we can drive at somewhat reasonable speeds in the sense that the speed limits on highways are now roughly approximately what they were back in 1970. So you take your benefits where you can get them, I guess. But nothing has changed on secondary roads. If anything, some of the secondary roads, they've reduced the speed limits. They've painted over most of the legal passing zones, which has made driving on secondary roads really, really aggravating. Let's see if I can get around this clover too. Nope. Unfortunately, it just seems to be the case that every time you have a legal passing zone, there's going to be another car coming, and then there won't be another car coming once you get past the legal passing zone. But oy vey, anyway, back to where I started this little rant. So now, you've got these cops who sit there in these extraordinarily expensive, that's how much it costs now, $40,000 to $50,000 for a police pursuit special Ford Explorer, because they don't make cars like the Crown Vic anymore. The Crown Vic was relatively inexpensive. They make these SUVs, and they are laden with all the latest stuff, so they're expensive. So ever wonder why your property taxes keep going up? One reason is because you've got all these cops sitting in these $45,000, $50,000 police interceptor Explorers. In my little county, it's a one-stop light county in Southwest Virginia. I think the fleet consists of 6 of these things. So, work out the math. That's like $250,000 worth of these vehicles. And it's not as though there's not any crime in my county. Not a lot of violent crime, but nonetheless, there are still meth heads breaking into people's houses and doing things like that actually involve harm caused to people, as opposed to, oh my, look, you were driving 64 miles an hour and you get pulled over for that. And the dick, and yeah, it's a dick thing to do to make your living this way. I'm sorry, don't tell me it's your job. You chose to have this job. Hands you this piece of paper that says you owe the county, last time I checked, it's probably like $150 to $175 for the quote-unquote crime of doing 64 in a 55 miles an hour zone. And then, once that gets duly noted on your driving record, you could bet your bippy you're going to get another piece of paying paper from the insurance mafia, which effectively works hand in hand with the government now to mulct you. Mulct is a wonderful word. It just means to extract revenue from you. And the pretense that they use is, oh, it's unsafe driving. You're a speeder. So, I don't know how these guys live with themselves. I, at one time, considered the thought, kind of like Hunter Thompson did a long time ago, of, becoming a part-time sheriff's deputy just as a side gig. I thought it might be interesting. And then I thought about it a little more and realized that, A, I would be taking money from people who didn't want to pay me, because that's what all government work involves. It's a hard reality. I know some people want to venerate police, but the bottom line is they're paid by people who are forced to pay them, and I'm not cool with that. I only like to accept money for work done by people who wish to pay me to do it. That's an honorable way to make a living, however you do it, if it's a free exchange. So there was that. But the other thing that I thought was much more problematic, and certainly it was disturbing to me, was that I didn't want to spend my time sitting in a state paid for, i.e. taxpayer paid for vehicle with the AC running, and just sitting there burning gas, waiting for some poor schmuck to drive past me going faster than the speed limit, and then using the threat implicit in the gun that I would carry on my hip and the badge on my chest to hassle this poor guy and make him pay effectively. I mean, I'm not personally doing it, but that's what happens, right? For this non-crime. It didn't sit well with me. And of course, you can't elect to not do that if you decide to hire on as a cop, whether it's a local police force, local sheriff's department, state police, whatever. A big chunk of your day is going to be occupied doing that sort of thing. And you can euphemize it all you want to, you can rationalize it all you want to, but unless you're really out of your mind, you know perfectly well that the bulk of those people have done absolutely nothing to justify or merit what you're doing to them, except in a purely legalistic, Talmudic, technical sense, as in, they stepped on a crack and broke their mother's back. They violated some religious decree of some kind for which Yahweh, meaning the state, will punish them. I personally like to live my life by a different code. The code that I like is the one in which people should be left alone unless they've actually done something that can be shown to have caused an actual tangible harm. Not hurt feelings, not somebody's afraid, but somebody actually was in some way damaged or injured by the action of the individual who's accused. Anyway, that's my rant for this Sunday morning. Thanks as always for listening to me. There's more over at EP Autos if you're interested, including a full-length review of this 25 Lexus LX700H. That's a mouthful that I've been driving for the last several days. So if you would like to know more about that, I hope you'll stop by the site, and we'll have more for you soon.